Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Bluefish Management Board and the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council to order. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Luisi, and I have the pleasure to serve you as chair of both the Bluefish Board and the Mid-Atlantic Council here today. The first item on the agenda is board consent and approval of the agenda. Anyone have anything they'd like to offer? Okay, seeing none, consider the agenda approved. Next, we have approval of the proceedings from February 2012. Thought that was a typo at first, but this board hasn't met very much in the past few years. But if we move forward with the scoping materials, as we're going to hear about today, we'll certainly be getting together more often in the coming year or two. Any objection to approval of the proceedings from February 2012? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to look out to the public. I did not receive anybody on the list that would like to offer any public comment on something that's not on the agenda, but I'll look out to the public now. Okay, seeing no one from the public, we're going to move on to item number 4, which is consider approval of draft scoping and public information document for allocation amendment. We're joined here today by Matt Seeley and Caitlin Starks. Matt is going to be providing us with the presentation. So whenever you're ready, Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me all right? Yep. So I'm excited to talk to you guys today about the Bluefish allocation amendment. So the objectives are jointly for the council and board to review the draft scoping document or public information document. You can call it what you want. It's the same document, just for the different council and board. And hopefully approve this document for public scoping hearings. And I want to emphasize that these are not public hearings on alternatives. We're simply trying to survey the public on issues they feel are important to try to include in the amendment. And we understand the new MRIP numbers will be out soon and things will change, but again, the point here is to simply survey the public on issues that they think should be incorporated into the amendment. So as part of the Council's 2018 implementation plan, we initiated this Bluefish allocation amendment. This initiation came from comments made by different stakeholders, some of which were Council and board members. And the motion that was set in December of 2017 was to initiate a Bluefish amendment to review and, if necessary, revise allocations between the commercial and recreational fisheries, the commercial allocations to the states, review the goals and objectives, and transfers. So to date thus far, we have formed our Fishery Management Action Team, the FMAT. The FMAT consists of council and commission staff, GARFO and Science Center staff, as well as the TC chair. We had our first meeting where we reviewed the action plan and the scoping document, went through multiple edits back and forth, and obviously those two documents are prepared. You should have had an opportunity to see them. If not, you should be able to see them today. Presented here is a tentative amendment timeline. There's a slightly more detailed version in the actual scoping document. Looking forward, in the summer of 2018, we are hoping to hold the scoping hearings and the public comment period. Into the fall of 2018, the Council and Commission will identify priority issues for inclusion in the amendment. Later on in 2018 and early 19, development of different options and alternatives. The Council and Commission will then review and draft the range of options. Later in spring of 2019, those range of options will be refined and approved. In spring, summer of 2019, we'll select those preferred options and hold public hearings. And then fall 2019 into summer 2020, way down the road, hopefully considering public comments, final action, and eventually rulemaking. As far as the scoping process goes, it's a NEPA requirement for the council for all EIS actions. Public scoping hearings are done to inform the development of the range of alternatives. We plan to hold these hearings potentially in a range from Maine all the way to Florida, most likely in June to July. There'll be a written comment period lasting about 30 days, and those comments can be submitted either to the council or the commission. And next, I'm going to go through the different issues that are potentially going to be covered in this amendment. It's not subject to just these issues, though. So the first issue is a review of the objectives of the FMP, which are listed here as well as in the scoping document. These have been the same since 1990, and so this amendment will consider updating them. I'm not going to go through them all, but they are listed out in the document. The second issue is related to the commercial and recreational allocations. These allocations were set in Amendment 1 back in 1999 at 83% recreational, 17% commercial of the total allowable landings. And this is developed from 1981 to 1989 landings data. The third potential issue are the commercial allocations to the states. Again, these were developed in Amendment 1 using catch histories from 1981 to 1989. And trends in state harvests have shifted, especially with yearly state-to-state transfers in the recent years. Fourth issue is the quota transfers. Commercial state-to-state quota transfers occur on a yearly basis and become repetitive amongst a few states, especially in recent years. And transfers from the recreational to commercial sector have occurred in every year since 2001. The fifth issue, fairly important, this issue is in place to allow the public to identify any other associated issues with the fishery that they would want involved in this amendment. And again, these comments don't need to be limited to issues included in the scoping document. As far as public comment is concerned, the scoping process was going to seek comments on current measures and strategies that should or should not be modified, new measures and strategies that should or should not be considered, fishery trends that managers should consider, and any other issues or concerns that should be considered or addressed in the amendment. Considering next steps, we hope to approve this public scoping document today. We'll move right into public scoping hearings once they get set. The dates are currently to be determined and locations. The written comments and hearing summaries will be compiled for review by both the Council and Commission. And then either the joint meeting in August or December of 2018 will review the comments and identify those priorities for inclusion in this amendment. Moving forward, so Caitlin and I will work with state representatives via email and some of you today, if available, to discuss interest in having scoping hearings in your state. And that's it. Take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? John Maniscalco?
Thanks. Do you intend to incorporate data into the scoping document, including the new MRIP estimates?
So we don't plan to include any of that information into this scoping document as we stand now.
Would that be something, John, that you'd want to see in the document as a follow-up to your question?
I mean, I think it certainly has large implications for the commercial recreational shift. So, and since we are talking about that, it would help. Yes. Thanks.
Matt, follow-up.
So my direction and understanding is that the point of this scoping document is to simply go out and survey the public. We're not trying to develop any ranges of alternatives, simply just see what other issues are out there that the public would like to consider and potentially have involved in this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So this is the opportunity, if there's something about the document that you want to make a comment to, if there's anything in addition. Oh, I'm sorry, David Pierce.
Yeah, it's a good document. One thing that's missing, though, is on page 6, why is this action being proposed? Obviously, that's quite an important question to ask, and in the text of that particular section, it references that we are, the Council and Commission, proposing this set of actions due to changing conditions in the bluefish fishery, and one important change in condition that's identified in the document is apparent shifts in bluefish distribution potentially related to the effects of climate change. Yet there's nothing in the document, I don't think, that touches on that. The public is going to ask questions. Okay, what do we have? What evidence do we have that the distribution has changed as a consequence of climate change or anything else for that matter? In addition, the end of that section talks about possible changing fishery conditions, so it suggests that we know that the fishery conditions have changed. So there needs to be more information in the scoping document that would address those issues, so we're able to give the public a more informed understanding as to why we're proposing this action.
Matt, Caitlin, is that something that we can work to include?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's definitely something that we can include, and we can work with the FMAD to get that into the document.
Tom Foti?
Yeah, I wasn't sure that we were doing this because of the effects of climate change of bluefish. I've had really no effects that I know of bluefish. It's always been a fish that's been from Florida to Maine, and it depends on years. It actually receded back to the Mid-Atlantic, and it hasn't gone back up to Maine. So I'm not sure climate change is playing any role. I thought we were doing it to look at commercial recreational allocations on bluefish. Maybe I'm missing something.
Caitlin?
I'll just make a note, and Matt can follow up if he has something to add. But I agree with you, Tom, that I think the amendment was initiated to kind of look at all of these issues. This isn't necessarily saying that climate change is causing these shifts, but it's just something that we want to look into. And so during the scoping period, we would be asking for information on that topic.
Tom, did you want to follow up to that?
Yeah, because I've never heard anything. Oh, excuse me, I thought you said follow up. Yeah, I just never heard anything about bluefish because of climate change. There's other reasons because of bait distribution and things like that, but not climate change. And so that's why I was just curious.
Okay, thank you. I had Roy Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just harking back to a remark Jim Gilmore made earlier about potentially one trip biasing catch estimates. If you look at Table 1, I just want to point out something strange in Table 1 with regard to Delaware's landings in 2016 and before relative to their landings in 2017. It almost looks like there's an order of magnitude typo there. It's such an enormous jump in landings. So if it's not a typo, then I wonder what happened, that landings would be 9 times greater in 1 year when you don't see concurrent leaps in landings in neighboring states of New Jersey and Maryland, for instance.
We had a couple of days with very successful interviews, Roy.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. A couple of days where the interviewers just by chance happen to catch, a bluefish targeted trip. It looks like an anomaly of low sample size to me. Thank you.
So you're questioning MRIP, Roy, right? Okay. I just wanted to get that clear. David Waters.
Thank you, Senator Waters, New Hampshire. And to Tom Foti's point, it does seem to me that, who knows whether the relative absence of bluefish in the Gulf of Maine has anything to do with the several degrees of water temperature rise, and it's hard to tell whether we will be able to find out whether ocean acidification is starting to have any effect on this species. But given the opportunity this presents, I would hope that we would at least look at those things in the context of number 5, where it says look at potential ecosystem changes, and why not see what our scientists might be able to say. It may be, really nothing for bluefish, but it's something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. John McMurray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So regarding issue 2, there was a recent discussion at the NOAA Recreational Fishing Summit a few weeks ago about, during one of the breakout sections, we talked about managers considering recreational encounters and availability instead of just yield. Given the history of the bluefish fishery and the fact that on the rec side, this is really a fishery that's valued for sport rather than meat. It's mostly a release fishery, at least it is now. So I would like to see some analysis of quantification of those fish release, and maybe there should be some analysis regarding what the value of keeping fish in the water is rather than just extracting them. I think that should definitely be considered when reviewing allocations. I guess what I'm talking about is maybe part of the recreational quota could be considered in regard to keeping fish in the water for anglers to encounter. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see any discussion of that in the document, and maybe that's something that needs to be brought up by the public during scoping, but that certainly is I think, a valid concern with the recreational fishing community.
Yeah, John, I think we can probably fold in maybe some language to that, but as far as getting in the weeds of an analysis, I'm not so sure that this is the place and time, but maybe as a follow-up to the public comment, if you're okay with that. You guys okay with that? Okay. Anyone else from the board or the council have any other thoughts for Matt and Caitlin? Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, I am looking for, we do need to take an action today, and that action would be to approve this document as presented and modified based on the comment. Chris Bat-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve the document for public comment as modified today, and I'll make that on behalf of the council and the board.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Chris Bat-Savage for both the council and the board. Peter Defer is going to second that for the council. Do I have another board member that would like to second it? David Borden. Okay, so we do have a motion before us, but Caitlin has asked for a second for clarification. Caitlin?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if we could get some clarification on how to add in language on looking at an analysis of percent release versus kept. I have a suggestion for just to add that in as a bullet under issue 5 so that it's in the document and we can take that out for public comment and see if anyone has comments on that issue. Does that sound good?
I think that was a question to you, John.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Can you ask that question again?
Caitlin just wanted to know if the issue that you brought up, if it would be reasonable just to add it under other issues on issue 5 as just a bullet with very little description, but at least it would be in there for the public to make comment about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think that would be acceptable. Just something that would generate some input on that level, I think that would be useful. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion to approve the document? Tony DeLernio.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain on the motion. I know you want to move it forward, and I think it's a good idea of moving it forward, but moving it forward without having the MRIP estimates put in place, I think could get us in trouble later on. I argued against it the last time we discussed this, and I lost. So I'm not going to oppose you this time. I am going to abstain on it because I think we could be making a mistake doing this without the new MRIP estimates. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate the comment. Tom Foti.
God, this is twice in one day. I agree with Tony. You know, when we look at striped bass, it's called the glory fish. When we look at bluefish in the recreational fishing community, it's called the money fish. Because when you have a blitz of bluefish on the beach or in a boat, people have to go buy so much more tackle. You know, striped bass fishermen use the same plug for 22 years, change the hooks, repainted and everything else, but bluefish doesn't give you that option. And they're the ones that make the money, and then when they're not around, that's when the party and charter boats can't really make a lot of trips because they're the ones they book to take the tourist out and everything else. And as I said, it's the money fish because anybody can catch a bluefish and they fight like hell. So I have concerns over this. I also want to see what the MREP data is because we're getting closer and closer that we're not having any transfer of quota, and that's because we're starting to fully utilize that with all the restriction on other species in the recreational fishing community. So at some point we need to look at the economics of this and what the transfer would do.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, seeing no other hands, does anyone from the audience have anything they'd like to offer to the motion? Greg DiDomenico.
Thank you. I'll wait to make the bulk of my comments during the public hearing. Sorry, when you take it out to public hearing. But I would also, John McMurray's comments sort of reminded me that could we also do an analysis on the other end, which is what would be the cost of leaving underused quota in the water. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Greg. We'll take that under consideration. Okay. Seeing no other comments, I'm going to bring it back to the table. I'm going to read the motion, and then I'm going to call the question first for the council, and then we'll take a board vote after the council vote. Okay, the motion is move to approve the draft scoping document for public comment as modified today. All those members of the council, please indicate by raising your right hand if you approve. It's 12. Any null votes? I'm sorry. Any no votes? We did have an abstention, one abstention. Okay, to the board, all those in favor? It's 11 in favor. All those opposed? Same sign. It's one opposed. Any null votes? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Caitlin, Matt, do we have any other business before the Bluefish Management Board and or the council at this time?
I think that's it.
Caitlin?
I'll just end by saying we'll follow up with the board and council state representatives on whether you're interested in having a state hearing.
Okay, with that, if there's no other business to come before the board and the council at this time, the meeting's adjourned. And I don't know if anyone has an announcement or anything for this evening. Maybe look to Bob or to Jim.
So we're going to have hospitality in room 15.